All right, hello and welcome to our Week 3 Google Hangout for Introduction to Learning Technologies here at the University of Saskatchewan. This week our guest is Dr. Trisha Dowling from the Western College for Veterinary Medicine at the University of Saskatchewan. We're going to be talking primarily about student response systems. Trisha has experience using a couple different ones and has a practice with learning catalytics that I think is interesting to hear about and hear her share. So there's myself, and Heather is with us as well, and then Trisha. So would the two of you like to say hello?
Hello, everybody.
Hello, everyone.
All right. So I'll start with some kind of introductory topics, and then we'll get into some of the questions that we've been asked by students. So first off, Trisha, would you maybe just give us a bit of an overview of the way you use these tools and your experience with these tools?
Okay, so I'm a professor of veterinary pharmacology. I teach mostly drug therapy to veterinary students, which can be a fairly dry subject, and so I try to engage my class as much as possible. And then a big major reason for me basically flipping my classroom is in the last couple of years I've developed a laryngeal problem, which makes it difficult for me to talk for long periods of time. So the traditional just go blah, 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 my PowerPoints for 50 minutes is kind of over for me. And so I started using a little bit of classroom response technology some years ago, and our university supported the Turning Point system. And it was okay, and I had some pretty good experience with it, but it's fairly limited, and you could ask yes, no, true, false, or multiple choice questions. Those were your only options. And even some of its flexibility with adding other kinds of questions or discussions, it was a little bit limited, but it did sort of seamlessly work with PowerPoint presentations. And so then with the help from the guys at the Gwen Moss Center, I started exploring some other avenues, and I've tried a few different products on the market. The product from Top Hat, I tried it a bit. I found it a bit too much, kind of feature-itis, and some of the things I wanted it to do, it couldn't do. And then I came across Learning Catalytics, which was developed by the physicists at Harvard, who really started promoting the flipped classroom technique. And the reason I like Learning Catalytics so very much is that they have over a dozen, I think it's at least a dozen different question types. And so I find it the most flexible. It does work on its own outside of the PowerPoint venue. So kind of depending on how I'm using it, I either work with a desktop computer and projector system and hook in my laptop, and then I flip back and forth between those two computers. That's typically how I end up using it, and it works okay. I really haven't any trouble with that. But what I was very excited about, as I said, was 12 different types of questions. And so some for me in a veterinary medical curriculum, one of the ones that's very important to have is what's called, usually in the vernacular, is click on target. And that's where I can upload an image and ask for students to identify an area on the image. And then if they just tap on their cell phone, laptop, iPad, whatever, and then it puts the composite together. And so if they've identified the right area, there's a green dot. If they're way off base, there's a red dot. And what's very flexible is I can outline irregular shapes with Learning Catalytics. Top Hats kind of had that feature, but it limits you to a circle. So for a medical kind of use, limiting to a circular area, I would include parts that were not correct in a correct answer. So that was one of the big drawbacks I found. Mm-hmm. Some of the other things that are really flexible, I don't use it a lot because I don't do a lot of math in my classroom, but it can actually, you can have it so the answer is a math problem that's solved, or even an equation that if it solves mathematically correctly, the system can actually score it. So that's quite nice. You can do short answer, long answer, multiple choice, matching, many answer, so multiple choice. And then what's really nice about it, too, is it's very easy for students to review their performance in that session in the classroom. They can go back and they can download. As the instructor, it keeps very nice track of student answers, and I can use it to take attendance or grading. It's been very flexible that way. So I use it in a positive way in my classroom in that they get bonus points, participation points. I don't make them have to get the correct answer to get a point for participating. And for my students, they like it very much that way. That's a low stress kind of environment in order to interact with me. One of the really great things about this system too, better than what I found with Turning Point, was that especially when I'm doing the two computer things, I can have the students seeing the big screen like a student would see. So I'm sort of a fake student. But then on my laptop, I'm watching as an instructor, so I can see the answers coming in. So Learning Catalytics also has word cloud, so I can say, what would be the right drug to treat this infection? And so then I can see what I think is, I would have picked as the correct answer, and if it gets the most votes or whatever, it comes in with the biggest letters. But sometimes a student comes up with something I didn't even think of as a potentially good answer. And so on the fly, I can go, oh, I need to address that. I need to say something about that one. And also, if I'm even just doing multiple choice, if I very quickly see that the answers are distributed through all of them, I can see this is going to be one where we're going to stop and I'm going to do the turn to your neighbor peer instruction piece where I'll say, oh, and I can show the answers without revealing the correct one. So I can say, oh, so some of you have the right answer and some of you have the wrong answer. So those of you who have the right answer, you're going to turn to your neighbors who have the wrong answer and convince them that you're right and they're wrong, and then we'll revote. And so it's very, very nice that you can kind of sense that on the fly, so you can throw that right in there.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the 12 different question types. Which question types would you say you primarily actually use in your day-to-day teaching?
Not the mathematical equation one. I would probably rely most heavily on short answer, word cloud. I like word cloud a lot because, like I said, it'll tease out. If I just do multiple choice, there might be a good answer that I didn't think of in the moment. And so it'll sort of tease that out. The only problem with that is sometimes if they don't spell it right, it'll show up 2 different times, that sort of thing. So it does mean that they have to kind of spell correctly. Another
when it
one
comes to drugs, that's a little bit of an issue.
Yeah, you got to know what the right names are. But we can kind of see it again as it displays. And then one that I really do like and use quite a bit is it lets me draw like a graphic. And so in my world, I'm looking at drug concentrations over time. So they go up when you give the drug, and then they should go down as the drug is eliminated from the body. So then I can answer a question and say, but this drug distributes into fat. So what would it look like if your patient lost weight or gained weight? And then each student can draw now what they think the line would look like, above or below, what the average population would be. And so when I first sort of show the answer, it will show kind of a conglomerate of everybody's lines, but it also allows me, though, to go back in and review, and I can see each individual student's line. And same thing with the word cloud. So if they put a dirty word, I can go back and tell who was not taking this seriously and that sort of thing. So I kind of introduce it the first day of class, and invariably there's a clown who's going to write something funny, and then I can go, okay, Joe Smith, I know that was you who did that, and that tunes them up very quickly.
Okay. First off, the class you teach it in, tell us about the size of the class, just a little bit in the room that you use it in.
Okay, so I have 2 classes. I have a second-year class that's kind of an introduction and then to pharmacology, and a third-year class which is more applied pharmacology. So I use it in both classes, and there's about 80 students in my classes. Vet school it's got a very set enrollment, so it's about 80 students in each class. And so most of the time I'm using it in the classrooms to support the topic, to get them thinking, to do problem solving. In the second year class, though, we're currently doing an exam, and it's an exam about how to write a prescription correctly. And it's the kind of thing that's not real exciting to do in a classroom, but it's important stuff. So we built a 20-question exam, and they get to take it until they pass it. And so that's running right now. They have up until their final on Monday. So I'm finding that also very handy to be able to do something like that out of class time, yet the students can still get the feedback, and as an instructor I can still manage that very efficiently.
Okay, so you're using the same tool that you use in the class, but you're using it outside of class time.
Yeah, it actually sort of gives you different settings on whether it's going to be like live and synchronous with an instructor, or whether it's going to be you kind of set the time frame of when they can take it. You can set how many times they can take it, and that sort of thing. So it's got a lot of nice features that way. And that was, Turning Point didn't have any of that kind of stuff. It was, at least, again, the versions I used some years ago, and I know things have changed. But again, I really like the flexibility of this particular system.
Okay, so you've kind of hit on a few things from this question from a student named Kevin. He was kind of wondering about clickers. He sees how clickers can be used like really well in a class where you're like lecturing, where you're just going through topics and then you stop and ask a question. But I've been in your class. I've seen how it kind of works. So you're not necessarily lecturing in your class. So how do you use the clicker in a way that's not just supporting a lecture?
A whole lot of it is that application of whatever and so I do the videos before class and that sort of thing. And because of my material, I can present a case. I can say, you have a dog and it has a bladder infection, how are you going to treat it? And so again, I can play around with it. I can say, okay, give it your best guess on your own first, and then kind of see what they come up with, and then do that peer-to-peer instruction where I say, now consult with your neighbors. And when you do that, like, the classroom comes alive. When I intersperse, and even if I just do it as a basic, multiple choice, choose or whatever, it wakes students up. I mean, it does. It gets everybody engaged. Nobody's sleeping. The acceptance of it has been really, really good. And then plus with this system, that they can go back and review those questions that we used in any particular class. They really like that. So the hardest part, and maybe that's a jump there, the hardest part is, as the professor, is to sit back and watch this happen, to not fill all 50 minutes with me talking and flashing PowerPoints. But that's really where the learning comes from, is that they're applying the knowledge instead of just having me say stuff and they write it down.
Right. I'm going to jump in with a question that I saw, and this was from Lynn, and she actually had two, and one of them you sort of already addressed, and it was about whether you can only use this with face-to-face courses or if you could use them online. But her other question was about how much prep time does it take to really prepare to be able to use this in class. So if you wanted to do a lesson in class using these, how much more prep time is there to this?
Sometimes I make up the question 2 minutes before class starts. And then, like I said, sometimes I can actually come up with something on the fly because an issue comes up. One of the nice things about this particular version, too, it allows you to bank your questions, and through the publisher Pearson, you have access to huge databases. Unfortunately, they don't have a big database of veterinary medicine questions, and none in my area. But I am like building my own database, and I actually hold the copyright. And you can click a button so you can share it with other professors that use Learning Catalytics. I'm a little shy yet. I want to make sure my questions are good. But now I have a couple years worth. And so even this year, that's what I would do, is I just go back to last year's questions, and I could very easily move them around into this year's lecture schedule and things like that. Now, coming up with good clicker questions does take a little bit of practice. I only know of one textbook, and I think I've lent it out, and I don't think it's in here, but it was one textbook that sort of addressed the the pedagogy of coming up with these kinds of questions, but I'll bet there's more out there now. And so it's the kind of thing that, if you're willing to share and you ask other people will help you. Now, if you're doing physics, because the physicists at Harvard came up with this, there's lots of good physics questions and even human medicine questions. So it kind of depends on your specialty. But it's very easy to take the framework of somebody else's question and then just modify it for your needs as well. And you learn real quick what works and doesn't work. Because if it's a really stupid question, it just flops right there in front of you, and then you just keep going.
Right.
So I guess, how many questions would you normally use in a 50-minute session?
It's kind of interesting because Eric Mazur, the guy from Harvard who started this whole peer instruction, he said some amazing number like 6 or 8 or whatever. And I don't know if it's just me or whatnot, but I'm like 2, 3 tops. And again, it kind of depends if it's something one leads to another, or we talk about something, we do a question, then we talk about another thing, and then do a question. But my students are also very highly engaged about the material, and so, and this again is a bit of a scary thing. You kind of don't know where the classroom's going to go. So maybe the question is very straightforward, and they answer it, and everybody gets it, and you move on. Or maybe all kinds of things open it up, and you spend a lot of time there. So one of the things that I would say that I almost always do is I have more questions than I know I'm going to get to. And then so either I move that question to the next class's module, or I just leave it there and the students have access to it, but we didn't particularly use it in class. So like the first session I did, I probably had 20 questions and we got to 3, right? So I'm not that bad now. I usually have 4 or 5. And so to me, it slows down the classroom, but they learn so much better. So I'm a fan of Jeanette Norden's, and her little saying is teach less better. And I would strongly say this forces me, encourages me to teach less better.
And that's to teach less better,
Yeah.
Not less better.
Yeah, there you go. Got to get the right pause in there.
Okay.
What has been the sort of the student feedback on the use of this?
Been fabulous. Been really fabulous. So one of the issues that came up was, and poor vet students have high tuition fees and so on, but I do not make them buy a textbook because there isn't a good one for Canadians. There's some American ones, but things are different. So I give a very complete set of course notes. Now I do a lot of online videos. So all of that material is free. Now, last year, Learning Catalytics allowed us to have a semester's worth of use for free for our students to try it out. Okay, that was an easy sell. It was free for everybody. But this year, they've sold to Pearson, and if I got it right, I think it's $12 a semester or $20 a year. And because my second years go 3 quarters, a semester and a half, they had to shell out $20, and the third years had to shell out $12. Not a single complaint. Not a single student, whined or whatever. But our college is considering, if we can find one system that everybody here likes, that the college would pay for the students. But, compared to the cost of a textbook and the fact that they have this access to the questions to review and things, I don't think it was unpalatable to anyone. Nobody complained.
Right.
So that's in terms of kind of the price, but in terms of use of it, what sort of feedback have you got? So students like it. Have you gotten any negative feedback or anything like that?
There is a little bit more about the whole flipping the classroom thing, and that certainly shows up in the literature on flipping the classroom, that the students who do very well academically, they're able to sit there and have somebody lecture at them, absorb it, apply it, and do great. So it's kind of funny. Your top-end students tend to have more the tendency of, why am I doing all the work? What am I paying you for? Where the bottom students who struggle, this makes such a difference that they do the homework outside of class, and then it's in class that they work through the problems, and they get support from their peers and from the instructor. And so they're the ones that benefit the most. And so I can really say the feedback comes the strongest from those who otherwise weren't getting it, and this has made all the difference. So I haven't not had a lot of direct complaints about using the clickers. I think what's been important is I made them pay for it, and I use it a lot. If I made them pay for it and I used it once a month, I think I would get complaints.
Mm-hmm.
But I've had nothing but very strong positive feedback about the use of it.
Okay. I think this is a pretty quick question, but Robin in the course asked if you integrate your student response system with the LMS, so like with Blackboard at all, do you import marks or anything like that from Learning Catalytics to Blackboard or not?
Supposedly you can. and I got to admit, around here, Blackboard gives lots of us fits. But most of these systems, you're supposed to be able to do it. It was actually easier for me to just download it as an Excel file and flip it over that way. But I think any of the commercial products will offer that compatibility. It just might take more IT support than I was able to utilize in doing it.
Okay.
Did it require a lot of support?
Not from my university people, and that was a bit of an issue. Was they were like, well, how are we going to support this? And it's like, I don't know. I'll call them because that's what they do. One of the first issues was because we have wireless nodes in the vet college, and IT couldn't guarantee me that 80 students could be hitting the wireless node simultaneously and it would work. Not a problem. Almost very, very occasionally a student would say they got kicked out and they had to go back on. But not every single class, and definitely was only like one student. So it certainly didn't overload the system that's placed in my college. And then anytime I did have a question and I posed it to somebody at Learning Catalytics, I had an answer in minutes. Like I found their customer service to be very helpful. But I also find their interface to be very user-friendly. I haven't had to ask a lot of questions about basic things. It's been very obvious on how to do it.
Yeah, and that sort of relates to a question from Niven. He or she asked what the best student response system would be to deal with a big student number. So say you had 500 students. Well, in your case, you've got 80, and the biggest issue is just thinking of the internet connection, right?
Yeah, I would think if you increase the numbers, it would just be the internet connection. You'd have a little more fun if you had a thing like that graphing thing where 500 lines showed up over your graph. It would be hard to tell what was going on. But again, if you did that as a take-home question or whatever, and then you looked at individual student responses, then it would work wonderfully. So that you'd have to probably, again, with that many students, you might have to wait a little longer. You have to get used to that silence in your classroom as you gave everybody enough time to respond and that sort of thing. But yeah, I don't see a problem with this system being able to handle that kind of a number.
I don't know if you have an opinion on this, but Jennifer in the course asked about what age, at what level you could be introducing student response systems, whether this one or any. And because we do have, I think it's around 15 to 20% of the people in the class are actually in the K-12 systems. And do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I know my 12-year-old knows how to work an iPhone, so yeah, I mean, it's really just the age that these kids are savvy with a tablet or a smartphone. Like in elementary school, my kids don't have a laptop themselves, but they have access to laptops, tablets, and then many have iPods or iPhones or whatever other version of a smartphone. So the kids are real savvy, and especially things like the click on target. There's features where you could ask a question where the student uploaded their own image. So those kinds of things would be very palatable to younger students who like the visuals and things like that. So they could upload an image and answer. I don't think there's a video because they couldn't upload a video. That would be bulky. But especially if they all got smartphones or whatever, they could take a, I don't know, find the red block and upload an image of it, right? And they could do that. So because it has such flexibility in the question types, yeah, maybe I can make my daughter do math questions with it. I would have to try that. But it's simple enough, the format and everything, and the students really like it. Even if I'm just asking a question, how do you treat this infection in this dog? I upload an image of the dog with the problem, so that even when they go back and review, they have the question, but they also see that image. And
Right.
so I like that kind of linked learning. I'm a visual learner. So I think, yes, I think as soon as they're old enough to work their technology, they're old enough to use this particular system for sure.
Mm-hmm. Actually, that kind of reminded me of kind of the interesting discussion about using like a clicker-based tool where it's just a standalone clicker device versus using one like that uses a phone or a computer or a tablet. And so you have experience with both, with students using clickers and also using a web-based one in your class. What are your kind of thoughts around those two options?
Okay, so that's what we did. We started with Turning Point, and our college bought the clickers, and then they would sort of rent them to the students for their first 3 years in the curriculum. And that was a bit of a pain. The batteries would die, they'd lose the clickers, and then we'd make them cough up another rental fee. And then over the years, those ones went out of date. And those ones were really just yes, no, true, false, multiple choice. Then they did get ones where you could more type in a word and things like that. And some places still on campus are doing that. But those clickers, I think they're charging students, I know it's more, it's probably more like $50. Correct me if I'm off on that.
I think maybe a new one might be 40, maybe.
Okay, but it's still going to be more than a year's worth of learning catalytics. And then with something like learning catalytics, it's whatever device they have. And we do require our students to have a laptop for their microscopic courses, histology and such. So they all own a laptop no matter what, but most of them also have cell phones or iPads and things like tablets and things like that as well. So the thing for us as the institution is we don't have to invest in the technology, and so we just don't have to worry about getting obsolete, and I think that's a real advantage to this. What I would like, that's a good point. What I would like if I had a dream to ask the guys at Learning Catalytics, and they'll be here this week, so I get to ask this. I do a lot of continuing education. So it would be really great if there was some way for me to know I'm going to go to Ontario and give a talk, and I could get a short-term license so that all the people attending my talk could use the system and answer my questions, because it's great to engage any learners in this. But then, it's just for a short term, and it would be cheap, and me as the speaker could afford it. And I don't think they have anything like that. And again, there's enough people in academia who also do continuing education. That's probably actually a pretty decent market.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you find, so obviously with the clicker, students would lose the clickers, forget the clickers, things like that. Have you ever had a case now where students don't have a device with them to get on?
If they are, they're losing that one participation point for that class, so they don't whine about it. And by having it being participation points and low stakes, I don't have to be a policeman. I don't have to worry that somebody didn't come to class but they sent their cell phone with their buddy or any of that. And my students are highly selected, highly motivated. That's not likely to be a big issue. But for really high stakes things like a final exam or anything like that, I'd be a lot more nervous about it. But by having this be participation, and okay, here's the honest truth. So most of them get all the participation points, but they are veterinary students. They're very motivated, but I just make the midterm and the final harder, right? So I just balance it out. But on the other hand, they like to succeed. They like to see that they got the credit for being there. So again, no complaints whatsoever. And probably the best reason for all of it is they're keeping up with the material, but not in an onerous way. It's a palatable way, as opposed to sleeping through my lectures all semester and then all of a sudden realizing they don't know anything 2 days before the final. I mean, that doesn't make for good lifelong learning. So I think that's a huge advantage as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And it also, another advantage, they're getting a sense of how I ask a test question. Because I go back to my clicker response database looking for questions that I'll put on the final exam. And some I will. It'll be a gimme. I'll give them one that was one we did. Or I'll give them something that comes higher order from something we did in the classroom, you know, that sort of a thing. So very useful for me, too, that I can access everything.
Just a quick reminder to people who are watching, if you want to tweet us any questions about this, the hashtag is ILT_USASK, ILT_USask.
All right, thank you, Heather. I forgot to mention that at the start, actually. There's a question here from Morel in the course about, and I think it relates more to kind of how you're flipping your class, but what sort of things do you put in place to ensure that students are coming to class prepared for the exercises or the case studies you're going to do in class?
Okay, yeah, that has to do with flipping the classroom. So I use another system. I create videos using PowerPoint slides and then me narrating them in screencast. Or, that right?
Camtasia.
Camtasia, there you go. And then they're hosted on screencast. And the Camtasia software allows me to put questions in. Now, more limited than Learning Catalytics. But those videos are great. They can watch a video on a cell phone. They can answer the questions. And I usually just do 2, worth a point. They can answer the questions. I can do it so they instantly know whether or not they got the right or wrong answer. And then that service, once a day, at the end of the day, it sends me an Excel file of everybody who answered the questions and how they answered. So that's the other half of the participation points. So they get a participation point in class, and they get a participation point for doing the video and answering the questions prior to class. And those videos and the prior preparation have gone over very, very well as well. And again, same sort of thing. They come into class, they've done the background, and now we're really ready to problem solve and explore and apply the knowledge. It is so much better. It is, you know, I never ever want to go up there and just talk to myself anymore. I just don't want to do it. When I can't, it hurts. And then 2, I've been a prof 20 years. I know what I've got to say. But this way, it is scary, and many professors will be scared to do this because you kind of don't know what's going to come up or where it's going to go. But if you like a bit of a thrill, if you like roller coasters, you see the light bulbs go off in your students' heads. And the very best, and sometimes it's serendipity. I set up a question, and it ended up being just simple multiple choice. But the majority of them answered it wrong, but it was kind of 60-40. So then I didn't tell them what was the right answer. I said, okay, now turn to your neighbor, because some of you have it right, some of you have it wrong, and those of you who have the right answer, convince your friends. Now, what usually happens is people who have it right are much more adamant, and they can back it up, and they will convince more of the people who have it wrong to change the answer for the right. But in this case, the way it worked out, because they kind of pulled something from another class but didn't pull all of it. So the majority who had it wrong convinced more of the minority who had it right to switch their answer for the wrong. So then I flip it up and I tell them the majority is wrong. And at first they're mad, they're indignant, how can this be, right? And then as I explained it to them, we worked through why it was wrong, then they really got it. They're still a little bit angry, but they really got it. And so that was, as I said, it was kind of serendipity, but it was kind of fun to watch the righteous indignation that they had to have been right. They're the majority, but it was actually they were wrong. So again, it's those moments I didn't anticipate that ahead of time, but then it presented itself and I could work with it. And it's one of those things I'm pretty sure they won't forget that, especially if they got it wrong.
Got some crazy sound going on. All right, so you found that strategy of having the videos ahead of time with the quiz questions in there pretty much makes everybody show up prepared.
Yeah, and again, I am lucky. They're a very, very highly motivated population. So one of the things about any of this sort of stuff, videos ahead of time, podcasting your lectures, there's a whole lot of people who go, oh, then they'll never come to class. But every actual study I've seen is that that's not true. That the students will come to class, but they come to class better prepared. So you kind of got to fight that myth that students will just blow you off, because I don't think that's true at all.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So I think at the moment that's it for the questions we had from students. Christy had asked on Twitter, which is the most popular system being used in secondary education. That's the question I don't know the answer to. I think there's kind of these bigger tools like Learn Catalytics and Poll Everywhere and Turning Point, and then there's some of those free ones like Socrative and things, but I haven't seen any data on which is actually being used the most, so unfortunately I can't answer that question.
No, and you'd probably want to like test drive a few, and that's kind of what we've been doing here in my college. So we've been having the companies come and kind of show off. But even if you're going to do that, it helps to practice or try a few questions on your own. That's how I figured out the one would only let me do circles for click on target, wouldn't let me define an irregular outline shape, and that was a deal breaker for me. But I might not have realized it had I not tried to do my own question, because I gave him the example. If the question was click on Texas on a map, if you had to define the correct area with a circle, the correct answer would include parts of Oklahoma and New Mexico. And again, in a medical profession, if I'm saying, click on exactly that broken part of the bone or whatever, that wouldn't do it all to be able to include incorrect areas. So yeah, test drive them and see how they work. And the other bit of advice I would give is the ones that are big that have the connections with the publishing companies. Quite often you seem to be able to access the textbook questions and things like that. So that might help get more bang for your buck when you're deciding which one to use.
Actually, there is a new question that came in on the discussion forum. So Lynn had asked a question earlier. This question is asking about just how did you get started with Learning Catalytics? And after you chose it, do you list it as a supply in the bookstore, or how do you inform students about it?
Okay. Like I said, they introduced Turning Point to our college, and so made it available, and we use it. So that kind of gave me the concept of using classroom response devices. And then as it started to fall apart, and I kind of got a sense there was more out there, then I kind of just, computer searches, Googled it kind of thing. And then I came across Eric Mazur's work with the flipped classroom, and then somehow made that connection that this was the classroom response device that the Harvard guys had come up with. And so then I started talking to them, and they let me, try it and that sort of things. And then I did my own sort of head-to-head comparisons. And, at the end of the day, I just find this particular one very useful. Now, how do I get it palatable to my students? I do list in the course syllabus that they're going to need an account with Learning Catalytics. Now, one of the things is if they buy a semester or a year, they could have multiple courses using it. So I've let other instructors know, I've made the students get a license, you could have a course too. So far, though, this year I haven't had any other takers. It's just me. But so that might also make it workable if you get like a whole department using it and it's used in multiple courses. So that really makes it cheap, right? If it's $12 split among 6 classes, right? That's less than a cup of coffee. The other thing that I think is important is to sort of get the students permission to flip your classroom, especially if they've never done it before. And so I do it by using a classroom response device question. I say, which is the most valuable use of your time? Is it learning the facts and information in the classroom, or is it learning the facts outside the classroom and using classroom time with the instructor present to solve problems and apply the knowledge? Well, when you make them vote on it, they always vote. that really they could just learn the facts faster on their own and then work with the instructor. But I think it's important to do that, to kind of get their permission rather than just surprise them with it. Because I have heard of cases where students had a negative reaction, but I think it might have been because they kind of, all of a sudden, what the heck is this? I got to read ahead of time and be prepared ahead of time, and then I'm talking to my neighbors, and what am I paying you for? You know, so I think that pre-planning is very important.
We got a new question from Tim on Twitter, and he asked, what key things about using student response systems effectively have you learned that you wish you had known when you started?
Good question.
Ooh, a very reflective question. I don't know if there's something I wished I had learned. You know, there's always just that bit of getting to know a system. I wish there was more out there about how to write a good clicker question, because I wrote some god-awful ones. But because nowadays electronically it's easy to keep the good ones, I have quite a good database of my own. I do wish I had more colleagues that I could learn from and share from, but again, that's my specialty. Others, like physics, you're in luck. There's a ton out there. I got good advice about getting their permission before, so I didn't make that mistake. I am privileged. I have very highly motivated students, so I can get them to do things. And then my own preparation was, at first there was getting comfortable with silence in my classroom, because that was new for me. You know, I was one of those cram every last piece of information in a 50-minute lecture. Mm-hmm. And so being able to just be comfortable with silence and reflection. Some other sort of pre-work that I've done here is that whole concept of the 1-minute memo. And you can, so if people don't know what a 1-minute memo is, you give students a little piece of paper, and at the end of the class, they write something about what was the most important thing they learned, and is there anything they have a question about. And you give it to them, and then you collect them, and I would go back to my office and I would read them. And I learned real quick that lecture I thought I delivered great, they didn't get it at all. Or what I thought was the most important concept, they thought something else was the most important concept. Or they had a really good question and I hadn't even thought that to answer that question, and then I could go in the next class and answer that question. Well, now you can do that same sort of thing, but electronically, because you can use the long answer feature. So you can also build reflection time and get that feedback. Because if you just wait till the end of the semester to ask them what they learned in your class, you may have blown it all semester long. So this way you get that, and any, like, even if it's just a question that nobody got the right answer, okay, I need to teach that differently. So in this sort of age of instant gratification, this is kind of a good place for it, as long as you're willing as the professor to accept that you blew it, that you didn't teach it, but now you've got a chance to fix it. Otherwise, you can go on naively thinking, oh yeah, I'm the best ever, they got that, you know, and they really didn't. So it's humbling and it's challenging.
Right.
Okay, maybe just off of that question, so obviously you've developed a bit of a skill around writing questions. So do you have any kind of tangible tips in terms of creating good clicker questions?
Well, I think you start where you're comfortable, and if people are already instructors, they probably already have created some multiple choice questions. So you start with what you've already got, but now you might say, okay, what drug would you use to do this or whatever, and then you got A, B, C, D, E, right? Well, then the first thing you might do is you could add that image to it so the student has the visual. Then you could say, well, maybe I can flip this around and I can just give the visual and the students have to click on target and tell me where the thingy is. Or you could very easily go from a multiple choice question where you gave them 5 choices to a word cloud where now they can put any choice, but you're looking to see that the majority have the most correct answer. And in medicine, for sure, lots of situations have more than one correct answer. So Learning Catalytics would handle that either with a word cloud or with a many choice question. So yeah, I would say you just start off with a multiple choice or a yes, no, or a true, false. And then you can start to expand from there. And again, with the variety of question types, you just start playing with them. Ones that haven't worked so well, because they take time, they have ones where you can rank the order of things. So for an example, I might have a set of treatments you would say give a horse that had an allergic reaction. And so I might have intravenous fluids, a steroid injection, an antihistamine injection, an EpiPen. And then they have to rank the order they would give them, because they're all correct answers, but it's important which order you give them. And Learning Catalytics lets you do that. You kind of move things around with little up and down arrows. But that one's a little more complicated, takes a little bit more time. I wouldn't try that one first. But, you know, if it doesn't work, you just tank it and you don't use it the next time.
One thing that I've seen other people suggest is having, if you have like a multiple choice question, having one of the options being I have no idea. Have you explored using that option or not?
Yeah, occasionally. I'm more likely to do that where I ask them to raise their hands, you know. How many things it's A, how many things it's B, how many is too scared to raise their hands, right? I always do that one. They do have the ability to send the instructor little messages. And so at the bottom of their screen, it'll have, I still don't get it, or I get it now. And so they can kind of communicate. And the different companies ones, they have more of that sort of what you guys call back channeling. I find it very hard to pay attention to that. I find that very distracting to me. But I will notice it after a session that somebody, and not many students take advantage of it, but every now and again I'll see I still don't get it, and then I kind of try to make sure that I make sure it's clear. But most of them will have sort of something like that that you can use as a feature.
Okay. Yeah, because the reason I've seen that suggested is you don't want to have, you know, say half your students just guessing and happen to get the right answer, and you think as the instructor, oh, they get it, it's time to move on, when in fact most of them just guessed at that.
Yeah, I suppose, but again, kind of depends on your question, and you know, they might just be looking at whatever their neighbor clicked to. So it's kind of good, again, however you play it. It's by being anonymous, I think I am pulling out the silent majority that wouldn't raise their hand. So I think I am getting more engagement. And I think, yeah, every now and again somebody just, you know, picks one or something like that. But it's, even if they didn't get it now or they were lazy now, because they know it might be on the final or it might be in a higher order on the final, they could still come back to it and learn from it. So even if the learning's not right there, I don't think I'm losing any ground.
Yeah, and in your course you have a fair amount of discussion around the questions too, right? So it's not just like you see, oh, you got it, time to move on.
Right.
Yeah, and that's why I said I can't get a lot in an hour. It's 2 or 3 tops. But I come out of the classroom revved up, because this way they come up, especially like word cloud. Word cloud really surprised me how often they come up with something I wasn't even considering, and it was a really good answer. And I flagrantly tell them that. I go, oh, look, somebody thought of this drug. Wow, you know, that's perfect. That, you know, that is and boy, that really makes a student feel good. Where if I just had A, B, C, D, E, they would never have had that chance to express that really great idea. So I think you do draw out some stuff in ways that you just hadn't experienced before.
Yeah.
Right. So Heather, have you seen any more questions anywhere?
No. We've got about 10 minutes left by my clock. I know that there is a little bit of lag time we've discovered between the broadcast and Twitter. If you want to send in a quick question, either on Twitter or Ryan and I are actually checking the discussion forum to see if anything new pops up there. You can get them in now, right now, and we'll try and stick around for a few more minutes and see if anything pops up. Otherwise, you can add them and we can maybe send them off to Trish later.
Sure.
And give us some answers. Is there anything else that you want to add?
I would just say try it. You know, experiential learning. It's just fabulous. And yeah, some of these programs seem to have a bit of featureitis, and I'm pretty computer savvy, as Ryan and Heather know. And if it's too difficult for me to figure out, it's going to be too difficult for most of the other profs in my college. And so there are so many computer programs that do that. They have so many features, and you can't make anything work, and you can't get help and that sort of thing. So I will say simpler is better. I don't know of one that has everything perfect, but I've gained a lot of experience and comfortableness with this particular one, and I got to say it really saves me. And no longer do I have to hand grade stuff. You know, the grading features are fabulous. Because I used to give out like homework assignments and they'd turn in and I'd have to read through them and score them and everything, and this saves me a lot of time, and I think the learning experience is better even. So I really like it.
Mm-hmm.
And students nowadays, they're so tech savvy. You know, they want the recordings, they want the videos. In a creepy way, they listen to me while they're driving long distances across the prairies or running on treadmills, which just horrifies me. But I would really reemphasize that they still come to my classroom, because there's just something about the live dynamic, but it's not threatening. They can make mistakes, you know, and laugh about it and learn from each other. So I really, really support this way of doing it.
Well, you know, every time we have a conversation with somebody about flipped teaching, this question always comes up about, well, do they stop coming to your class? And yet every instructor I've spoken to about this, predominantly the students are still coming to class.
Yeah.
Because they're actually doing something active when they're in class as opposed to just sitting there and being lectured to.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
And you can just see it, and especially when you do have them talk to each other, there's no sleeping. I mean, the classroom explodes with energy and conversation, especially if you get a really kind of tough one, and they're really having to argue for their correct answer. And you're really, that's the best way to know that the knowledge is secure within you, is that you can explain it to somebody else.
Right.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
And for everybody listening, I have to say, Heather and Ryan, they helped me on this journey quite a bit. I took their seminars and such, and then just launched with it. And I couldn't have done it without our Gwenna Moss Center. It's a fabulous center here at the U of S.
We appreciate the shout out.
Yeah. All right,
Yeah.
Just checking to see if any other questions have come in. If not, I think we'll let you go.
Okay.
Nothing new on Twitter. And looks like nothing new in the discussion forum. So looks like we hit on everything that we wanted to hit on with this. So thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
Thank
All right.
you.
Take care.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Bye.